Hello, my name is Alex Villeneuve. I'm going to start out with a story, and you guys can talk to me after if you have any questions. When I was 15 years old, I met Dustin Bezier, school permaculturalist and biology teacher at Jasper Place High School. Dustin was the first person to introduce me to the concept of needs and yields. This principle and the shift in perspective I adopted afterwards has led me to approach innovation, entrepreneurialism, innovation, networking, and entrepreneurialism in a completely different way. In one of Dustin's first lessons, he explained to us that his job as a permaculture designer was to build resilient food production methods that mimic natural ecosystems. This style of design yielded well-planned gardens that, much like real ecosystems, require little or no maintenance in order to thrive. Dustin and other permaculture designers use the concept of needs and yields to effectively place components of their garden. They do this with a needs and yields analysis. Much like the name suggests, one simply picks a part of the garden in which to analyze and jots down everything that component needs in order to thrive and everything that it produces as a result. Once the designer has a needs and yields analysis of every part of the garden, he connects components with needs that match other components' yields, similarly to puzzle pieces. The perfect example of this needs and yields relationship is an aquaponics system. Fish yield ammonia-rich waste and need clean, oxygenated water in order to thrive. Plants need ammonia-rich fertilizers and filter waters as a result. When combined, in an aquaponics system, both needs and yields are satisfied and you have a largely sustainable system. After learning that I too could create effective and sustainable systems based on observing and catering to needs and yields, I began to take the time to visualize the needs and yields relationships in many of the systems around me. I started looking at components of forests, gardens, kitchen environments, the educational system, student spaces, and even empty walls completely differently. Exactly like in a forest or garden, the more connections and diversity a system had, the more likely it was to thrive. Suddenly, unused yields stopped seeming like problematic waste and started seeming like a chance to design a need. I stopped seeing obstacle and I started seeing opportunity. In my grade 11 year, I joined as many extracurricular activities and innovative projects that I could possibly manage. I now knew that every connection I could create in one or scrap of knowledge I could absorb could be vital in my ability to connect needs and yields in a future project. I was very careful to never categorize information or connections made in one project to that project alone. I found that as a result of this, the more that I learned in one activity, the more I was able to apply to completely different projects. Of course, these connections were not always positive ones. In fact, some of the most valuable connections I made during this time were the ones that followed failure. I tried and failed so many times during these projects that I began to look at them not as negative experiences, but just as another connection that I could utilize later on. Failure no longer scared me. It encouraged me to try again. The perspective I shaped during this time and the way I applied it to projects got me selected to represent Alberta's education system in both Finland and Toronto, led a classmate and I to design a food production system that won Edmonton's first innovation fair, and allowed me to grow the ingredients that I would use to make a ginger beer that went on to become Edmonton's first official winter drink. Every time partners and I applied needs and yields to a project, and every time we were able to connect components of seemingly unrelated projects, the more people liked to label us as innovators. Although the innovative label seemed to follow almost every one of our projects, innovation alone was never one of our end goals. Over time, I began to realize that innovation was just a byproduct of designs that analyzed needs and yields and created smart connections between them. I carried this perspective on to college. On my first day of Olds College, in the brewery while we were disposing of spent grains, which are a byproduct of the brewing process, I began to think about what the wasted grains were yielding and how their potential could be maximized. I almost instantly made the connection between my extracurricular experience growing oyster mushrooms for permaculture and culinary projects and this wasted grain product. I thought that this waste would make an excellent substrate on which to grow a variety of edible mushrooms. After a few weeks of experimentation, I observed that as a result of using the spent grains to produce mushrooms, that the grain's texture was greatly changed. I thought that since the complex fibers were being broken down during the mycelium's growth, that maybe the leftover grains could be used as animal feed. I tested this theory by sending my mushroom-inoculated grain for nutritional analysis. These were the results. It turned out, as the mycelium grew in the grain and produced mushrooms, the crude protein content of the substrate dramatically increased. Now, not only was there potential for gourmet mushroom production, but as a direct result, I could also produce a high-protein animal feed. Adhering to my needs and yields principle, my waste was now a valuable product. After these discoveries, I decided to incorporate my own company and to pursue the production of mushrooms and mycelium products from brewers' waste. Since high school, I've had a lot of time to think about what innovation means and how it applies to the real world. I feel many people and companies approach innovation from completely the wrong perspective. It seems that there's a quota for innovation in order to sell you a product, and many seem to innovate just for the sake of innovating. If everyone in this room were to go out of their way to intentionally create connections, join new groups, projects, and clubs, take the time to stop and think about what the things around them are yielding and how their potential could be maximized. And if, when you leave this room, you stop letting failure seem like failure, you will undoubtedly yield innovation.